Election 1992 was one of the most unpredictable presidential elections in American history. It was an election year that witnessed the downfall of an incumbent president who at one time earlier in his administration had enjoyed 91% approval ratings. It was a campaign that saw a little-known governor of a small southern state rise to accept his party's nomination after a nasty and bitter primary contest. And 1992 was the year that an independent billionaire from Texas ran as the working man's candidate. I'm Jim Heath. All this and a lot more coming up next as the Heath Broadcasting Organization recaps election year 1992. Stay with us. Covering the political arena since 1980. This is HBO, the Heath Broadcasting Organization. Complete coverage of Election 92 continues. Our story begins back in 1988 at both the Republican and Democrat Party conventions. The Democrats were meeting in Atlanta, Georgia, and they were about to nominate Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis. It fell upon Bill Clinton, the nation's youngest governor, to officially place Dukakis' name into nomination. This was Clinton's first big chance to introduce himself to the American people. He had a lot to say about Dukakis and himself, so he prepared an 18-page nominating speech. And 20 minutes into the speech, Democrat delegates were getting restless.
And we know that when workers can't read, eventually they'll have to pay for it, and we will too. We tolerate more homeless children than others do, degrading the most blameless among us. We live in the only advanced country in the world that's still in the dark ages when it comes to child care. That means we have lower productivity on the job and higher stress in the home. Our school dropout rates are twice those of our competitors. Those of our children who do finish school are 2 years behind their competitors in Japan and Europe in learning. All those kids that are going to be competing with ours for the good jobs Mike Dukakis wants them to have. And so many of our young people want to go to college, but they can't.
You're listening to the lengthy nomination speech of Governor William Clinton of Arkansas, placing in nomination in the name of his friend, Michael S. Dukakis, governor of Massachusetts. Bill Clinton now is seriously in oversight. He's only about halfway through his prepared text, and he should have been done about 5 minutes ago because it was scheduled to go only 20. We say all this. We're going to be here. We'll have to be here until this whole proceeding is over, but at the same time, they have to be aware of the television audience and whether or not it is staying with this lengthy speech, which is a recitation of a lot of the stuff that we've heard in the past couple of days. As these delegates continue to interrupt the speech from time to time with some demonstrations. Chris, where are you?
I'm in the New Jersey delegation, and I can tell you that this place is just ready to explode, and I think that they're long past the period, Tom, of listening to Governor Bill Clinton. This had been very carefully planned, the idea that Bill Clinton would give a speech, a short speech of about 15 minutes, listing Michael Dukakis' qualifications, talking about what kind of a governor he had been and why he'd be a good president, obviously citing the Massachusetts miracle. But it has gone on so long that he has completely lost this crowd. The people are ready for the demonstration, long past ready, and it seems that Bill Clinton has overstayed his welcome here in this hall.
Clinton would become the topic of many comedians' jokes. As a matter of fact, it got so bad that many of his friends back in Arkansas felt that he might be severely politically damaged. But an appearance on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show demonstrated Clinton's good humor, and the public soon forgot that lengthy speech. A month later in New Orleans, Louisiana, the Republicans held their national convention. After 8 successful years as president, Ronald Reagan was about to hand over the Republican Party to his vice president, George Bush. There was uneasiness. Even diehard party loyalists didn't feel that connected with Bush, and going into the convention, he was 18 points behind Dukakis in the latest public opinion polls. But Bush's acceptance speech on the final night of the convention was his best speech ever. It unified the Republican Party, put Americans at ease, and propelled him into a landslide victory on Election Day. But part of Bush's speech that evening, some say the single most important part of it, would come back to haunt President Bush just 4 short years later.
And I'm the one who will not raise taxes. My opponent now says he'll raise them as a last resort or a third resort. But when a politician talks like that, you know that's one resort he'll be checking into. And my opponent won't rule out raising taxes, but I will, and the Congress will push me to raise taxes, and I'll say no. And they'll push, and I'll say no, and they'll push again, and I'll say to them, read my lips. No new taxes.
With important promises made, Bush would win the election in a landslide. In his inaugural address, he spoke about creating a kinder and gentler nation, and he was off to a good start. The economy was holding strong, and America proved its resolve in ousting Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega. The Berlin Wall came down, and the Cold War came to an end. In January 1991, America proclaimed war in Iraq. Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein had invaded the tiny oil-rich country of Kuwait, and the United States and Allied forces were determined to push him back.
As I report to you, air attacks are underway against military targets in Iraq. We are determined to knock out Saddam Hussein's nuclear bomb potential. We will also destroy his chemical weapons facilities. Much of Saddam's artillery and tanks will be destroyed. Our operations are designed to best protect the lives of all the coalition forces by targeting Saddam's vast military arsenal. Initial reports from General Schwarzkopf are that our operations are proceeding according to plan. Our objectives are clear. Saddam Hussein's forces will leave Kuwait. The legitimate government of Kuwait will be restored to its rightful place, and Kuwait will once again be free. Prior to ordering our forces into battle, I instructed our military commanders to take every necessary step to prevail as quickly as possible and with the greatest degree of protection possible for American and Allied servicemen and women. I've told the American people before that this will not be another Vietnam. And I repeat this here tonight. Our troops will have the best possible support in the entire world, and they will not be asked to fight with one hand tied behind their back.
Saddam Hussein's army, the 4th largest in the world, was crushed with relative ease. It was a tremendous victory celebrated in parade after parade, and it pushed George Bush's popularity ratings into the 90% range. At the same time, Democrats were beginning to seriously wonder whether they were going to find anybody to run against Bush in the '92 election. Big-name Democrats like Richard Gephardt, the House Majority Leader, and Senator Al Gore from Tennessee announced in the aftermath of Desert Storm that they were no longer interested in running for president. This brought forward some lesser-known politicians like the first announced Democrat candidate, former Massachusetts Senator Paul Tsongas. Tsongas had left the U.S. Senate 10 years earlier because of a personal battle with cancer. Now his health was proclaimed fine by his doctors, so off he went on his lonely trek to do battle with an incredibly popular president. Other Democrats would soon join the race, including Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa, U.S. Senator and former Governor of Nebraska Bob Kerrey, the Governor of the state of Arkansas Bill Clinton, the Governor of the state of Virginia Doug Wilder, and the former Governor of the state of California Jerry Brown. The candidates headed for New Hampshire as party leaders began to look them over.
Any other general election campaign, showcase the economic issue?
Well, I believe what's happening here, Bob, in New Hampshire is really what's happening across America. It's not, it may be a little bit more intense here, but it's happening in Michigan. I just came from Michigan. They've got tremendous unemployment problems. Colorado, California, it's happening in Florida. They're having budget problems. I mean, it's happening all over America.
Well, I guess the point is that for a while, the whole world, the whole country's watching New Hampshire, so you can drive it. You can drive it home.
That's right. And the issue here, the major issue in New Hampshire is a major issue in America, and it's the issue I've been stressing: economy and jobs. Economy and jobs. That's it.
This is the collaborative effort. Yes.
Yeah. Say hi to Katrina.
Right down.
Hi, Katrina. It's where you walk in there. Nice to see you again. Doing all right? Fine. Come on. You got that party going on here. Yeah. Excellent. It's a very exciting time, isn't it? What? It's a pretty exciting time.
Yes, it is. Hi. Good. I saw you in Littleton a while back. I'm on Dick's staff.
He doesn't enter.
And in fact, I came down.
Figure out what I can say.
Right at this moment.
For Dick. In the room.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Sally. How are you?
Nice to see you. Trying to think of some jokes.
Okay, I'll try to. We'll prime you for it. Okay.
Where I come from, if you're the subject of a roast, they send you to the emergency room after it's over.
Well, we'll see if you're true to your origins.
Thank you.
Well, I was saying that I don't know how it can be a very good roast because nobody called me to get the dirt on Dick, and I am the sole repository.
I haven't checked with my parents and my brothers and sisters.
Now, your parents
they may be leaking information on the side. But
see, if they'd only approached me, he'd be in serious trouble. But so far as I know, he's relatively safe.
Yeah. Actually, roll call is right. Nobody knows that much about me. I'm actually a perfect candidate for the Supreme Court. And I was.
So you're bowling. You're going to do anything to get this strike.
I made 5 strikes and 8 frames. That's not bad. 5 spare, my strikes.
You guys don't be like county seat wrestlers right now, you know. County seat wrestlers.
They move from one to the other. Everybody know each other's holes. One guy takes the fall one time, the other one takes it.
One guy takes the fall, right.
By late 1991, with victory parades long since over, the country entered into an economic recession. At first, President Bush reacted by stating that the country was not in a recession, but retail sales and the unemployment rate soon proved otherwise. Leaders within the Republican Party, including conservative newspaper columnist Patrick Buchanan, began to speak openly of challenging Bush for the Republican nomination. Meanwhile, racial riots in Los Angeles exposed a growing division within American society, and Bush was slow to react. Soon thereafter, ex-Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke would announce that he was seeking the Republican nomination for president.
We have liked the rhetoric of George Bush. We have not liked the performance of George Bush. George Bush told us that he would not raise our taxes. He said, "Read my lips." But what he meant apparently was kiss my hips, not read my lips. Government has increased continually under the George Bush administration. Taxes have increased. The massive government bureaucracy has gone on, and the middle-class taxpayer is not getting any sort of relief. As a result, business is suffering, the individual working person is suffering, and I believe very strongly that we need a change. We've heard very good things from the state of Indiana, and we've heard good things from many, many states, and we think there'll be opportunity.
Come on now.
Alex. I think Michigan is a very good state because Michigan faces the same issues that all of America face.
David Duke would win few votes and he would drop out of the race shortly after Super Tuesday. During the height of his popularity, President Bush decided to go along with a congressional plan to raise taxes. He was breaking that pledge that he had made back at the '88 Republican Convention, but he thought it was a responsible act geared toward bringing down the staggering national debt. Conservatives like Pat Buchanan strongly disagreed, and in January 1992, Buchanan entered the race to, in his own words, Bring down King George.
To our economic crisis, however, we Americans know the answer. It is to end the steadily rising drain of wealth and resources in Washington, to ease up on, not add to, Mr. President, the tax burden on American business, to unleash, not tie down, the genius and energy of American enterprise. And as for the predatory traders of Europe and Asia, who have targeted this or that American industry for dumping and destruction, if I am elected, they will find themselves on a collision course with the President of the United States. When we say we will put America first, we mean also that our Judeo-Christian values are going to be preserved. And our Western heritage is going to be handed down to future generations and not dumped onto some landfill called multiculturalism.
At first, President Bush thought Pat Buchanan was a trivial opponent at best. The president was still having difficulty deciding whether he really wanted to seek re-election or not, let alone having to deal with a serious primary challenger. But then the polls started coming in from New Hampshire. They showed Bush barely above 60%, with Buchanan closing in fast. The Bush people were forced to send in top surrogates for the president, including First Lady Barbara and Vice President Dan Quayle. Bush himself would later campaign in the state, and oftentimes he seemed hyper and out of touch.
The other one is that people say, well, you know, you're in trouble in New Hampshire. Well, that may be, but I'm here to listen. I'm here to take the questions. I'm here to say, hey, there's a lot to do in partnership. The federal government, the state government, where you've got superb leadership, and the people themselves. And of course we care. And I you know, somebody gave me the analogy of a country western song about a train, hoping they see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a train coming through. And I trumped it with saying, well, if you're going to, you remember the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band one, if you got any country music people here, if you're gonna see a rainbow, you got to stand a little rain. Well, New Hampshire stood more than its share of rain, and job hurting, and families wondering how they're going to make their ends meet. But there is going to be a rainbow out there. There's some fundamentals that are pretty darn good, and yet we've got to do better.
Thanks for coming. Please avoid the quick fix.
We got it. We got it.
That's right. That's right.
The political debate's pushing it that way, but I think we'll have good investment, saving, investment, growth initiatives.
Long-term stability. Thank you, sir.
Our very best.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you. Nice to see you. Thanks.
Hope you're feeling better.
I feel good.
You look great.
24 hours. I mean, that was it.
Great.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice
good to see you.
Nice meeting you.
Hey, how about a
There you
tax
go.
cut for the middle class? If not that, a tax increase for the rich.
Well,
all right.
I don't want to raise taxes. I'm against that. So we'll see what we can do. Hi. Nice to see you. Good to see you. Thank you.
Before the Iowa caucus, which was 1 week before the New Hampshire primary, Virginia Governor Doug Wilder decided that it was time to return home. He dropped out of the race before a single vote was cast. Iowa's favorite son, Senator Tom Harkin, coasted to an easy win in the Iowa caucus. This was widely expected and did little to boost Harkin's chances in New Hampshire. The field of 6 Democrats still looked small and weak, and many in the party were begging New York Governor Mario Cuomo to enter the race. Cuomo had been a favorite of liberal Democrats since his captivating speech at the 1984 Democrat Convention in San Francisco. Cuomo refused to make a decision. One day he was probably in, the next day he was probably out. The governor eventually held a press conference stating he would not be an official candidate, but in typical Cuomo fashion, he left the door slightly open.
Responsibility as governor to deal with this extraordinarily severe problem. Were it not, I would travel to New Hampshire today and file my name as a candidate in its presidential primary. That was my hope, and I prepared for it. But it seems to me I cannot turn my attention to New Hampshire while this threat hangs over the head of the New Yorkers that I've sworn to put first. I asked for and won the responsibility to deal with their vital interests in the governor's race of 1990. The commitment I made then to do all that I could do to protect New Yorkers from the kind of problem we now face was not a commitment of convenience to be set aside if and when I was offered another and grander opportunity for public service.
Do you think that if you had run a campaign that you would have been able to become the Democratic nominee and that you would have been able to win the race?
You'll never know. I keep thinking about that if I had stayed in baseball. I wonder if I would have made money.
Feeling some relief that a big-name Democrat like Mario Cuomo was probably not going to enter the race, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton adopted a more relaxed campaign style. A saxophone player since high school, Clinton would entertain his supporters at fundraisers by playing a few songs on his sax.
Ready? Yeah.
While the governor was out playing his sax, the president, still believing his poll numbers would soon improve along with the economy, made his re-election plans public at a quickly arranged rally in Washington, D.C.
Thanks to all of you for this wonderful, warm reception, and I have an announcement to make. I want to continue serving as your president 4 more years, so from this moment... So from this moment on, I'm a candidate for President of the United States, officially.
With less than a week to go before the New Hampshire primary, candidates in both parties started an advertising blitz on New Hampshire television.
Mr. Bush, I have never seen it so bad where people have to lose their homes, people don't have jobs, they don't have...
You can give it to me straight because we've known each other a long time. A lot of you are hurting. I've seen the pain in people's eyes, from those who own struggling businesses to those who work in them. This state has gone through hell. It's gone through an extraordinarily difficult time. I am determined to turn this state around.
Paid for by the Bush Quail 92 Primary Committee.
In 1988, we believed George Bush when he took the tax pledge. We believed him again when he promised.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Then Bush hit us with the largest tax increase in history. Bush betrayed our trust. He raised our taxes. Can we afford 4 more years of broken promises? Send Bush a message. Vote Pat Buchanan for president.
Paid for by Buchanan for president.
All over America,
I see empty factories. The dashed hopes and dreams of working people all over this country. When I look around and I see this empty factory here, I see the legacy of George Bush's economic policies. You can look down this hallway, and you can hear the echoes. You can hear the echoes of the people that once worked here. They were good citizens, they fought our wars, and they paid their taxes. And they worked in these plants to make our country better. And what I hear when I hear those echoes is a challenge to us to not forget what made this country the great and wonderful America we are. People at work. And what they're saying to us, don't forget, don't give up, build it again. We can do it.
Paid for by Americans for Hartford. He's no movie star, but Paul Tsongas is something else. When no one thought Chrysler could survive, Paul Tsongas forced the agreement in Congress that saved 100,000 jobs. When special interests were grabbing up our last great wilderness, Paul Tsongas pushed through what has been called the conservation bill of the century. And while others feared the president's popularity, Paul Tsongas took him on with a new economic vision for America, getting the tough jobs done. It's called leadership, paid for by the Tsongas Committee.
Now is the time to take back America. If you want to join in the fight to make this country work for us, for all of us, for we the people, finally there's something each of us can do. Listen to Jerry Brown on this recent TV interview.
How can I, as somebody who's raised $18 million over the last 15 years and have been truly in the business of politics, now come on and say, okay, now we want a grassroots revolution? Well, I'll tell you, I know how the system works. I've been a part of it. And out of that experience, and having been away from it for 8 years, I've come back and said, it is so rotten, it is so paralyzed, that I think we ought to try to bring the people back by limiting contributions to $100. I am willing to cut the umbilical cord to the corrupt power that is holding our country back. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I have a lot of flaws. Everything you suggested in your question has truth to it. But if I don't make myself available with the resources and the time and the notoriety that I have, tell me, who's going to do it?
If we all get together and take action, we the people finally have a chance to make our voices heard, to make a difference, a real difference, for ourselves, for our children, and for our country. And now is the time.
It's really not what I'm going to do, because I can't do it by myself. I can only do it if each of you join in, get involved, and make this cause, this movement, your own. And I want to repeat again our number, 1-800-426-1112. Please call. Together, we can make democracy work for all of us. And that's the only way it should work, and that's the only way it can work.
What's happening in the world economy is like a hockey game, where others guard their goal to keep our products out while we leave our net open. It's cost us jobs and destroyed companies. We're becoming a low-wage nation, and all George Bush can do is go to Japan and beg for a few concessions. I'm Bob Kerrey, and if I'm president, the time for begging is through. I'll tell Japan if we can't sell in their market, they can't sell in ours. And if they don't get the message, they'll find out this president can play a little defense, too.
Fight back, America. Paid for by Kerry for president.
This is the story of a young man born in a small town called Hope, Arkansas. The son of a widow who taught him that anything was possible with hard work, faith, and determination. This is the real story of Bill Clinton. He worked his way through Georgetown and Yale Law School, became a Rhodes Scholar, and then set out to make a difference for others. In one of the poorest states in our country, and against all odds, made progress. First, he tackled the schools. Standards, accountability, smaller class sizes, and now the highest graduation rate in the region. Built the economy, one of the highest growth rates in new jobs of any state in the nation. Manufacturing jobs created at 10 times the national rate. It isn't a miracle, it's just progress, and a bit of hope.
That's what this election's about. And it's about your future. I want you to send a message to this country about what kind of country we're going to have, about what kind of future you want, about what kind of leadership you believe in, and about how we can win again.
This is the time. New Hampshire is the place. This is our country. Let's take it back. Paid for by Clinton for president.
In the weeks prior to the New Hampshire primary, Governor Bill Clinton emerged as the Democrat frontrunner. He had managed to portray himself as a moderate Democrat, and his easygoing style was a big hit. But then the other woman came forward. Her name was Jennifer Flowers, and she alleged she had had a 12-year extramarital affair with Clinton. A tabloid magazine paid Flowers to reveal her story, and later in the year, she would make even more money by burying it all in Penthouse magazine. Immediately, images of Gary Hart flashed through Democrat Party leaders' minds. In the 1988 election, leading Democrat frontrunner Gary Hart had to drop out of the race after a similar tabloid published a photo of he and a model on a boat called the Monkey Business. Clinton campaign strategist James Carville was devastated. He knew the campaign was close to folding. But a phone call from Don Hewitt, the executive producer of the popular program 60 Minutes, changed everything. Hewitt invited the Clintons to appear on the program immediately after the Super Bowl. Clinton grudgingly agreed to do it. Like the famous Dan Rather George Bush TV confrontation 4 years earlier, this interview would be a turning point in the '92 race for the White House. Polls would quickly show that Clinton's personal life was not near as important to voters as other issues like jobs and the economy.
You've said that your marriage has had problems, that you've had difficulties. What do you mean by that? What does that mean? Is that some kind of, help us break the code? I mean, does that mean you were separated? Does that mean that you had communication problems? Does that mean you contemplated divorce? Does it mean adultery?
I think the American people, at least people that have been married for a long time, know what it means and know the whole range of things that it can mean.
You've been saying all week that you've got to put this issue behind you. Are you prepared tonight to say that you've never had an extramarital affair?
I'm not prepared tonight to say that any married couple should ever discuss that with anyone but themselves. I'm not prepared to say that about anybody. I think...
Governor, that's what you... Excuse me. That's what you've been saying, essentially, for the last couple of months.
Look, Steve, you go back and listen to what I've said. You know, I have acknowledged wrongdoing. I have acknowledged causing pain in my marriage. I have said things to you tonight and to the American people from the beginning that no American politician ever has. I think most Americans who are watching this tonight, they'll know what we're saying, they'll get it, and they'll feel that we have been more candid. And I think what the press has to decide is, are we going to engage in a game of gotcha? You know, I can remember a time, and it was sad, when a divorced person couldn't run for president. And that time, thank goodness, has passed. Nobody's prejudiced against anybody because they're divorced. Are we going to take the reverse position now, that if people have problems in their marriage and there are things in their past which they don't want to discuss, which are painful to them, that they can't run?
You're trying to put this issue behind you. And the problem with the answer is, it's not a denial. And people are sitting out there, voters, and they're saying, look, it's really pretty simple. If he's never had an extramarital affair, why doesn't he just say so?
That may be what they're saying. You know what I think they're saying? I think they're saying, here's a guy who's leveling with us. You may think that we should say more, and you can keep asking the question, but I'm telling you, I think that I'll come back to what I said, I have told the American people more than any other candidate for president. The result of that has been everybody going to my state and spending more time trying to play gotcha.
There isn't a person watching this who would feel comfortable sitting on this couch detailing everything that ever went on in their life or their marriage. And I think it's real dangerous in this country if we don't have some zone of privacy for everybody. I mean, I think that is absolutely
I couldn't agree
critical.
with you more, and I agree with you that everyone wants to put this behind you. And the reason it hasn't gone away is that your answer is not a denial, is it?
But interesting, let's assume...
But it's not a denial.
Of course it's not. And let's take it from your point of view. If that won't make it go away, you know that you can cut this round or cut this flat. I mean, if you deny, then you have a whole other horde of people going down there offering more money, trying to prove that you lied. And if you say yes, you have just what I've already said by being open and telling you that we've had problems. You have, oh good, now we can play gotcha and find out who it is. Now, no matter what I say, to pretend that the press will then let this die, we're kidding ourselves. I mean,
you know, this has become a virtual cottage industry. The only way to put it behind us, I think, is for all of us to agree that this guy has told us about all we need to know. Anybody who's listening gets the drift of it. And let's go on and get back to the real problems of this country. The problems are about what's going to happen to families in New Hampshire and the rest of this country in the future, not what happened to mine in the past.
I don't like some of these questions any better than you do, but the question of marital infidelity is an issue with a sizable portion of the electorate. According to the latest CBS News poll, which was just taken over the weekend, 14% of the registered voters in America say they wouldn't vote for a candidate who's had an affair.
I know it's an issue, but what does that mean? It means 86% of the American people either don't think it's relevant to presidential performance or look at whether a person looking at all the facts is the best person to serve.
We've gone further than anybody we know of, and that's all we're going to say. And people can ask us 100 different ways and from 100 different directions. And we're just going to leave the ultimate decision up to the American people.
I think most Americans would agree that it's very admirable that you have stayed together, that you've worked your problems out, that you seem to have reached some sort of an understanding and an arrangement.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're looking at two people who love each other. This is not an arrangement or an understanding. This is a marriage. That's a very different thing.
You know, I'm not sitting here as some little woman standing by my man like Tammy Wynette. I'm sitting here because I love him, and I respect him, and I honor what he's been through and what we've been through together. And you know, if that's not enough for people, then heck, don't vote for him.
A good friend of yours, one of your campaign advisors, told us the other day, Bill Clinton has got to level with the American people tonight. Otherwise, his candidacy is dead. You feel like you've leveled with the American people?
I have absolutely leveled with the American people.
We're going to do the best we can to level with people, and then we're going to let them make up their minds, because I think if the American people get a chance, and if they're trusted to exercise their vote right, because people talk to them about real issues, this country will be okay. That's what we're betting on, and we're just going to roll the dice and see what happens.
You called it a gamble. You came here tonight to try and put it behind you. You're going to get on the plane when you walk out of this room and go back to New Hampshire. You think you've succeeded?
That's up to the American people, and to some extent up to the press. This will test the character of the press. It is not only my character that has been tested.
Jennifer Flowers' allegations created a tidal wave of outrageous publicity for Clinton. One tabloid went so far as to suggest Clinton had had sex with numerous African-American hookers. Most of Clinton's Democrat challengers left the womanizing allegations alone. Jerry Brown did touch on it briefly near the end of one debate on PBS, but Clinton calmly responded.
You've attacked particularly the senators for their wage, their pay raises, and taking money. I mean, is that a character issue to you, or is that a political issue?
You know what it is? It's an issue about the whole way the system works. And you know, even right now, it's part of the unreality. I mean, what is the biggest character issue out there right now? It's the stories on Bill Clinton, isn't it? And whether or not there's an issue there or whether there isn't. And whether or not it betokens a respect for women, or every time a woman, wait a minute, that's what everybody's thinking about. They're looking at that. And whether it's legitimate or not. And I think that that raises a question.
It's not legitimate, and they ought to ease up on it. What's legitimate is our issues, our ideas, our agenda. That's what's legitimate in this campaign.
Well, every time a woman makes a claim, she's always viewed as lying or a bimbo. And I think we got to face up to the fact that that does reflect some values that are not representative of what a lot of women in this country feel.
Robin?
You want to reply to that?
I think I've said all I need to say about that.
Okay.
And I think the American people got more with me and my wife and our life together than they ever thought they'd get in this primary process.
Besides the question of marital infidelity, Flowers also produced recorded phone conversations between her and Clinton discussing the possibility of Governor Mario Cuomo entering the presidential race. Clinton first denied having the conversation with Flowers, but later apologized to Cuomo for what was said.
Most people think, you know, that except for Cuomo, I'm doing the best right now. And we're leading in the polls in Florida without Cuomo in there, but Cuomo's got 87% name recognition, and I have 54%. So, I mean, they're at a terrible disadvantage of name recognition still, but we're coming up. And so I think we're moving pretty well. I'm really pleased about it.
particularly care for Cuomo's demeanor.
Well, he is so aggressive.
Well, he seems like he could get real mean.
Mean some bitch.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't have some mafioso major connections.
Well, he acts like one.
Yeah.
I have not listened to the tapes. I don't know what they say. I know what they thought they said. I heard about that, and I just wanted him to know that if anything was said, I didn't mean any offense by it, and that's all it meant. And I wanted to give a genuine statement to that effect. Mario Cuomo's known me since 1976, and he knows I'm not in any way prejudiced against either him in general specifically, or any ethnic group in this country in general.
Because if you say it this casually about Italian Americans, what do you say about blacks? What do you say about Jews? What do you say about women? What do you say about those poor people?
With Cuomo upset, party leaders in doubt, funds drying up, and his polls sinking fast, Clinton was hit with yet another major controversy. A man who had been the head of the ROTC program at the University of Arkansas said Clinton had promised to join the program in 1969 as a way of avoiding the draft when he was most vulnerable to being called, and then Clinton had reneged on his pledge. A letter Clinton had written the ROTC chief thanked him for saving me from the draft, which he couldn't have otherwise ducked without spoiling what Clinton referred to as his own, quote, political viability, unquote. Clinton's evasiveness as to the details of his draft record probably hurt him more than having not served in Vietnam. All of this, coupled with recent admissions that he had smoked but not inhaled marijuana while he was in college, drove Clinton's negatives through the roof. In a matter of a week, he had gone from the party frontrunner to a second-place finisher behind Paul Tsongas in New Hampshire. On the Republican side, challenger Pat Buchanan would do surprisingly well, scoring over 30% of the vote against a sitting incumbent president.
Today, from dawn to dusk, the Buchanan Brigades met King George's army all along the conquered Manchester-Nashville line, and I'm here to report they are retreating back into Massachusetts.
Actually, Catherine, the cries are rather muted. We've had a written statement from the president himself. Chance to talk with White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater, who acknowledges that the president has absorbed some enormous body blows, as he puts it, up in New Hampshire, and says that from now on the Bush campaign will have to pay a little bit more attention to drawing the distinctions between Mr. Bush and Mr. Buchanan. As he put it, Mr. Buchanan, having gotten 40% or more of the vote in New Hampshire, has earned that kind of attention.
Look, this fight's just begun. We got to... We may not quite be golden yet, but bronze ain't bad.
I will go all across this country to the rest of the nation, asking them to embrace the new covenant that I have advocated to restore opportunity and increase responsibility and rebuild a sense of the American community. We no longer can have a country where I worry about me, you worry about you, they worry about them. That's the kind of country the Republicans have given us for more than a decade. We've got to be one country again, going up or down together again.
My attitude about charisma is, if you don't have it, marry it. And I will also say to America, you're going to love Nikki Tsongas. You leave her alone.
Hello, Washington. This is New Hampshire calling. Are you listening? Washington, we are sending you a message. Just tell us the truth. Just tell us the truth. We're grown-ups, we can deal with it, we can overcome it. Give us vision. Give us truth.
Even though Clinton had finished second in New Hampshire, campaign strategists still regarded him the winner. He had survived and placed ahead of both Harkin and Kerry, and the South was still ahead. Clinton's moderate message would be particularly appealing in his home region. The Democrats debated in Colorado, and the testiness between Bill Clinton and Paul Tsongas was becoming more and more obvious.
Every one of these debates, Senator Tsongas has been reading to the rest of us, and we haven't ever done that. But the implication, if it's printed, it's true. Now, here's a Time magazine, March 2nd. One area particularly in which Tsongas would have the government take a leading role is in the creation of nuclear power plants. Tsongas calls for building 300 to 500 megawatt plants rather than the current 1,200 megawatt models. Now, I didn't lie, and maybe he thinks the Time magazine author lied, but since we have a presumption that the printed word is always true in these debates with Senator Tsongas, I'm quoting from it. Let me say one other thing. The first untrue negative ad in this campaign was run against Bob Kerrey and Bill Clinton by Paul Tsongas, who ran an ad saying that we were for a middle-class tax cut to increase the deficit of the United States, when both of us called for an increase in the incomes in the taxes of people who were upper-income people whose taxes went down in the 1980s. That was the first negative ad in South Dakota and Georgia. Who knows where else it ran? And it wasn't true then, and it's not true now.
All right, we're into free. Hold on, we'll get to it.
I'd like to chance it.
We're into free-for-all time here, and we're going to let Senator.
You didn't get the answer. Yeah, you did.
Well, if we're in the free-for-all, yeah, I'd like to say. I'd like to try to.
Wait a minute.
I would like a chance to respond if I can.
We're going to start. We're going to start with Senator Tsongas. Let's do this in TV sound bites, okay? Around 30 seconds per answer. If you want to talk, raise your hand, and we'll just use up the last 5 minutes that we have. Go right ahead.
First of all, the Time magazine story, they never talk with us. It's going to be in this coming week, number one. Number two, Rocky Mountain News, evaluating the ad. Evaluating the Clinton ad, quote, misleading. Number three, I take a pledge. Let's all agree. No ads, no attacking each other, no ads against each other. You know, come on.
What about your ad? What about your ad, Senator?
You take your ads off. I started yesterday because you've been on my back for a long time. Put your hand up. Oh, put your hand up, Bill. No negative ads. Put your hand up.
Governor Brown.
Listen,
put your hand up.
I didn't go negative. Hey, if we're going to take a pledge, Paul, I'd like you to tell us who are the $1,000 contributors who are giving you all the money to buy all those ads.
That's reported. Don't evade the issue. Put up your hand.
Tom Harkin would drop out of the race before Super Tuesday, Bob Kerrey shortly thereafter. It became clear prior to Super Tuesday that Pat Buchanan's support was beginning to level off at around 30%. What was considered a victory in New Hampshire was quickly becoming old news in the eyes of the national media. Pat Buchanan spoke to David Frost on PBS about why he was challenging President Bush.
In the last three presidential elections, Ronald Reagan ran as a solid conservative in 80 and 84, and George Bush ran conservatively against Michael Dukakis in 88. We got 3 landslides. You have to remember, when George Bush was running in 88, going to the daycare centers and patting the tots on the bottom, he was losing until he took Lee Atwater's advice and columnist Pat Buchanan's advice and started going after Dukakis. He was down the tubes by 17 points. When he did, and he ran as a conservative against liberal Michael Dukakis, not Democrat Michael Dukakis, he won a minor landslide. We're trying to bring George Bush back not only to the principles and values of the Republican parties, but the ideas and ideals that win us 3 straight landslides.
Super Tuesday, the day that 11 states, mostly Southern, hold their primaries, was held on March 10th. And as expected, President Bush and Governor Bill Clinton would do extremely well.
Decision 92, Super Tuesday. Here from New York is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Voters on this Super Tuesday put Bill Clinton and President Bush solidly in the winner's circle tonight, but with reservations. At a time of great anxiety in this country about the present and the future, the only real enthusiasm about these candidates seems to be in their own families and among their hardcore supporters. This day was the toughest test yet in the primary season. 11 states for the Democrats, 8 for the Republicans. About a third of the delegates needed for the nomination. Primaries in Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Democratic caucuses in Delaware, Missouri, and Hawaii. And as I say, a clean sweep for the president tonight, a very impressive win for Bill Clinton, especially in the big pivotal states of Texas and in Florida. We want to show you the winners now, beginning on the Democratic side. As you can see, Bill Clinton, a native of the South, did extremely well in Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Mississippi. His now principal Democratic challenger, Paul Tsongas, a native son of Massachusetts, won that state, also next door in Rhode Island. And now we can project Paul Tsongas, the winner in the Delaware caucuses tonight as well. What does that mean in terms of delegates? Remember, a lot of delegates were at stake today, about a third of those needed for nomination. It's worth remembering that on this Super Tuesday, 783 delegates were at stake. You need, on the Democratic side, 2145 for the nomination. Bill Clinton picked up 429 today, Paul Tsongas 201, and Jerry Brown just 23, but Brown will stay in the hunt. So we want to show you now President Bush and how impressively he won tonight as well. But as I say, with that continuing protest vote, that is more than a nuisance for this sitting Republican president. He's the winner in Texas, Florida, Massachusetts, Tennessee, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Rhode Island. Pat Buchanan, or a combination of Pat Buchanan and David Duke, getting about 30% of the protest vote in a number of those states. What does that mean in terms of delegates for the president? Well, he won very impressively tonight. 421 were at stake. The president gets more than 360. He needs 1,205 for the nomination. No one expects that he'll be knocked off by Pat Buchanan between now and then. The question is, how much will the president be softened up by this continuing challenge, by this very resourceful and pugnacious Republican right-wing challenger to the president?
The people in the South heard the worst about me, but they saw the best. They know that the true measure of character in politics can never be perfection, because if it were, no one could pass. The true measure is genuine commitment that lasts day in and day out through failures and disappointment and defeat and setback. The true measure is rooted in a desire to do better and a belief that it is always possible to do better and that we are morally bound to do better. That has been the driving force of my life in and out of politics.
A number of things hurt President Bush in almost every primary state today, mostly a wide-ranging discontent with the administration he's running. According to our exit polls, 7 out of 10 Republican voters are dissatisfied with the way the federal government is working. And a quarter of the Republicans said they weren't just dissatisfied, but angry. Of those Southern Republicans who are angry, 51% voted for Pat Buchanan, 41% for George Bush. The numbers were similar in Massachusetts. Another factor hurting the president: more than 1/3 of Republican voters said his reversal on the tax pledge was an important factor in their vote. And of them, 57% went for Buchanan, only 35% for Bush. As for the president's approval rating, some 36% of Republicans today disapprove of the way he's doing his job. And once again, Pat Buchanan got the vast majority of their votes. Keep in mind, many Democrats also disapprove of the way the president's doing his job. No surprise there. But more importantly, we found even greater anger today among Democrats at the way the federal government is working. And the bipartisan nature of that anger shows how very vulnerable George Bush and other incumbents might be in November.
The week following Super Tuesday, both Illinois and Michigan would hold their primaries. Bill Clinton would win in both states, forcing Paul Tsongas out of the race. Tsongas had developed a strong following. Many were attracted to his more conservative economic message. And with his departure, new doubts about Bill Clinton's character and electability bubbled to the surface. On March 24th, Jerry Brown, the last remaining challenger to Clinton, scored an upset. He won the Connecticut primary. Clinton's people were alarmed. They weren't worried so much about Brown, he was way behind in convention delegates, but rather the message that this sent, which was, Clinton is a wounded candidate. There was talk of a brokered Democrat convention. Clinton himself seemed to be testy and on edge. He was heckled at campaign appearances, and it took all of his restraint to remain calm and collected.
And we've got to go into, that's not true.
Without parental permission, you know it's true.
Now, will you just calm down? Now, you know.
He's addressing you. Let him speak. I'm listening.
Let me tell you something. If I were dying of ambition, I wouldn't have stood up here and put up with all this crap I've put up with in the last 6 months. I'm fighting to change this country. And let me tell you something else. Let me tell you something else. You do not have the right to treat any human being, including me, with no respect because of what you're worried about. I did not cause it. I'm trying to do something about it. I have treated you and all the people who've interrupted my rallies with a hell of a lot more respect than you treated me. And it's time you started thinking about that.
Although Paul Tsongas had dropped out of the race, he allowed his name to stay on the ballot in New York, site of the next big presidential primary. Polls there actually showed that Tsongas had a pretty good chance of winning the primary, even though he wasn't even campaigning. Jerry Brown was busy soliciting the support of organized labor and other traditionally liberal groups. It was a tough and bitter primary for Bill Clinton. His Southern demeanor seemed somewhat foreign and sometimes out of place in front of his New York audiences. The press was having a field day with the questions of marital infidelity and the draft-dodging situation. Polls showed that Clinton would get people's votes, but that they weren't impressed with his character or his ability to govern. Clinton ended up winning New York by a significant margin, and talk of Paul Tsongas getting back in the race quickly faded.
4 years ago, George Bush spoke to the Republican convention and told the American people that he was a quiet man who heard the voices of quiet people. Well, it turned out he scared those quiet people away from his good and decent opponent, but once he got in office, he could not hear their voice or feel their pain. He left them to twist in the wind of fate. And I tell you tonight, my friends, the quiet people are going to have someone who hears their voice, who feels their pain, and who will work with them to change their lives. That's what this election's all about.
Enter Ross Perot. The Texas billionaire had made an appearance on CNN's Larry King Live in February. After being asked by King 5 times whether he would consider running for president, Perot finally responded that if the people acted by helping him get on the ballot in all 50 states, he would run. The response was overwhelming. Faced with the choice of Bush or Clinton, angry Americans wanted another alternative, and Perot's straight talk and candor made him an immediate hit. All through June, Perot led in public opinion polls, but then he came under closer scrutiny. The honeymoon period that he had enjoyed with the national press came abruptly to an end. Perot would officially leave the race in July, although he continued to fund his volunteer groups throughout the summer. By September, Perot's name was on the ballot in all 50 states, and he would re-enter the contest once again. Perot's 30-minute info commercials, paid for by Perot personally, would attract millions of viewers starved for candid information.
We used to have the world's greatest economic engine. We let it slip away, and with it went millions of jobs and taxpayers. Let's take a little time and figure out what happened to the engine. Let's raise the hood and go to work. Let's diagnose the problem. I can tell you before we look at the engine, an engine tune-up won't fix it. We're going to have to do a major overhaul. Here's the picture on our country's debt. Look at how it's grown over the years. We're now up to $4 trillion in debt. That is a staggering load for our country. To help you understand how fast this debt has grown and when it grew, the green is the debt we had in 1980. The red is the debt that has been incurred in the last 12 years. We've had an enormous growth in debt, and we don't have anything to show for it. Okay, here's another headache. It's like the guy that went into the hospital, thought he had a sore arm, found out he had gangrene. But here we are. We're tough people. We can handle it. Look right here at the red. 70% of that $4 trillion debt is due and payable in the next 5 years. Folks in Washington financed long-term problems, short-term, to keep the interest rates down. That's suicide in business. That's suicide in your personal life. That's suicide in your government. If the Japanese, the Germans, and the Arabs, and all these folks that buy our treasury bills ever lose confidence in the United States of America or the U.S. dollar, we're in deep trouble here. Or to use Washington terminology, we're in deep voodoo, folks.
In surprise election results overseas, conservative British Prime Minister John Major stunned pollsters by winning another majority in Parliament. For the first time this century, the same party had won 5 consecutive elections. George Bush would cling to this upset British election throughout the remainder of his campaign. The 1992 Democrat Convention was held July 13th through the 16th at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Unlike recent years, the convention was unified, and Bill Clinton had his opportunity to reintroduce himself to the American people. He had chosen Tennessee Senator Al Gore, another baby boomer and fellow Southerner, as his running mate. The ticket was touted as a new generation, and Democrats were sensing victory.
3 years ago, my son Albert was struck by a car crossing the street after watching a baseball game in Baltimore. Tipper and I watched as he was thrown 30 feet through the air and scraped another 20 feet on the pavement after he hit the ground. I ran to his side and held him and called his name, but he was limp and still, without breath or pulse. His eyes were open with the empty stare of death, and we prayed, the two of us, there in the gutter, with only my voice. His injuries, inside and out, were massive, and for terrible days, he lingered between life and death. Tipper and I spent the next 30 days and nights there at his bedside. Our family was lifted and healed in no small measure by an incredible outpouring of love and compassion and prayers from thousands and thousands of people, most of whom we never even knew. Albert is plenty brave and strong, and with the support of 3 wonderful sisters, Corinna, Kristen, and Sarah, and 2 loving parents who helped him with his exercises every morning and prayed for him every night, he pulled through, and now, thank God, he has fully recovered and runs and plays and torments his older sisters like any little boy. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you this straight from my heart. That experience changed me forever. When you've seen your 6-year-old son fighting for his life, You realize that some things matter a lot more than winning. You lose patience with the lazy assumption of so many in politics that we can always just muddle through. When you've seen your reflection in the empty stare of a boy waiting for his second breath of life, you realize that we were not put here on earth to look out for our needs alone. We are part of something much larger than ourselves. All of us are part of something much greater than we are capable of imagining. And my friends, if you look up for a moment from the rush of your daily lives, you will hear the quiet voices of your country crying out for help. You will see your reflection in the weary eyes of those who are losing hope in America. And you will see that our democracy is lying there in the gutter, waiting for us to give it a second breath of life.
What is George Bush doing about our economic problems? Now, 4 years ago, he promised 15 million new jobs by this time, and he's over 14 million short. Al Gore and I can do better. He has raised taxes on the people driving pickup trucks and lowered taxes on the people riding in limousines. We can do better. He promised to balance the budget, but he hasn't even tried. In fact, the budgets he has submitted to Congress nearly double the debt. Even worse, he wasted billions and reduced our investments in education and jobs. We can do better. If you are sick and tired of a government that doesn't work to create jobs, if you're sick and tired of a tax system that's stacked against you, if you're sick and tired of exploding debt and reduced investments in our future, or if, like the great civil rights pioneer Fannie Lou Hamer, you're just plain old sick and tired of being sick and tired, join us, work with us, win with us, and we can make our country the country it was meant to be.
Democratic presidential nominee Bill Clinton spelling out at great length what he calls the new covenant for America. The new covenant in this speech was a catalog of all the ills as he sees them, all the cures that he'll bring to America. This is a candidate who does like long speeches. He spoke for almost an hour tonight, just over 53 minutes altogether. He began with a joke about his speech 4 years ago at the Democratic National Convention, in which he nominated Michael Dukakis by saying he wanted to finish that speech. Portrayed himself as a moderate Democrat from humble beginnings. He has a special political relationship, especially with women and the young, two constituencies the Democrats are counting on. Talked at great length about family values, about children, about hope, and about change in America. The ticket. John Chancellor.
What a lot of people will be talking about is the length of the speech. He ran about 23 or 24 minutes longer than the schedule called for. Yesterday, in what was quite a funny remark, Governor Clinton, who had spoken too long here in the previous convention, said he didn't want this to be his finest hour and a half. It didn't run that long, but to a lot of people in this hall, I'm afraid it felt that it was an hour and a half. And I think a lot of people will be talking about that. We're now to the joyous part of the evening.
Right. Well, to give him his due, he wanted to define himself and what he stands for tonight. You do get the impression that Tipper and Hillary get along. He wanted to define what he stands for, who he is. There's been continuing concern within the Clinton campaign that too many people believe that he is the son of privilege, that he came from a wealthy background in Arkansas.
I think he dispelled that, Tom, tonight. I think he did a very good job of saying who he is and where he came from.
For the record, 64,000 balloons will be dropped here. As some young men dream of being concert violinist or Major League Baseball players or doctors, Bill Clinton, knowing him as I do, has always dreamed that someday he would be here. He was a man destined to run for president, a born politician. He met John F. Kennedy when he went to Washington, D.C., as a representative from the state Boys Nation, the American Legion program. Elected governor when he was 32 years old, served 5 terms.
Polls immediately after the Democrat convention showed Clinton with an amazing 30-point lead. The Democrats took off on a bus tour across the Midwest, and for the first time publicly, White House staffers were saying that their man might be a one-term president. Faced with a stagnant economy and dwindling polls, President Bush called on his best friend Jim Baker to run his re-election campaign. Baker was the Secretary of State and not anxious to leave that important post, but the president was in serious trouble and Baker knew it. The Republican National Convention was held August 16th through the 19th in Houston, Texas. The Bush people had agreed to let Pat Buchanan speak in prime time on the first night. It turned out to be a serious mistake. Buchanan set a mean tone for the convention, going so far as to personally attack Hillary Clinton. The American people were turned off by the nasty and divisive tone. Republicans wanted to make family values the single most important issue in the campaign, but it wasn't working. Vice President Dan Quayle had been ridiculed for condemning Murphy Brown, an unwed fictional TV character who had had a baby out of wedlock. This, combined with Quayle's mistake of coaxing a grade school student into spelling the word potato with an E on the end, was not establishing the desperately needed momentum Republicans needed. The Vice President's acceptance speech, however, on the final night of the convention was his best speech ever. The President's speech had been spliced together just hours before, but he delivered it forcefully, and Republicans left Houston convinced they could still win this election.
Everybody who watched the Democratic convention noticed how they hid their congressional leaders. You couldn't find them anywhere. Maybe it was a slick idea to keep those Democratic congressmen and senators under wraps. But on election day, they're going to learn a hard lesson. You can run from a TV camera. You can even run from your own delegates, but you can't hide from the voters of America. For more than a month, the media have been telling us that Bill Clinton and Al Gore are moderates. If they're moderates, then I'm a world champion speller.
My feelings about big government come from my experience. I spent half my adult life in the private sector. My opponent has a different experience. He's been in government nearly all his life. His passion to expand government knows no bounds. And he's already proposed, and listen to this carefully, he has already proposed $220 billion in new spending, along with the biggest tax increase in history, $150 billion, and that's just to start. He says he wants to tax the rich, but folks, he defines rich as anyone who has a job. And You've heard of the separations of powers? Well, my opponent practices a different theory, the power of separations. Government has the power to separate you from your wallet. Now, let me say this. When it comes to taxes, I've learned the hard way. There's an old saying, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. 2 years ago, I made a bad call on the Democrats' tax increase. I underestimated Congress's addiction to taxes, and with my back against the wall, I agreed to a hard bargain. One tax increase, one time, in return for the toughest spending limits ever. Well, it was a mistake to go along with the Democratic tax increase. But here's the question for the American people. Who do you trust in this election? The candidate who's raised taxes one time and regrets it, or the other candidate who raised taxes and fees 128 times and enjoyed it every time?
Speech. What did you think? Bearing in mind, it was political speech. That's a separate art form from any other kind of endeavor.
Just short of an hour, long speech for an acceptance speech. The question is, will the president have pushed all the right buttons? Now we're into the absolutely traditional balloon drop of the evening. There were a lot of them here. Large, small, red, white, and blue. We got our roles reversed this year, David. You're always the one who talks about balloons.
It's become a part of the action. High school kids come and pump up the balloons and tie the little necks so that the air would stay in them.
Humble High School, if I'm not mistaken, from the Houston district. They were in here. Their great complaint was that their fingers got raw tying it on. Early stages of the celebration. I don't think they need us to talk.
we could get a wide shot of this, we could see the size of some of these balloons, exactly like beach balls.
Usually a candidate receives a significant bounce in the polls after their party's convention. President Bush's numbers, however, stayed just about the same. With Ross Perot's re-entrance into the race, the candidates decided to include him in a series of debates. After 2 weeks of initial squabbling about how many there should be, the candidates finally agreed to 3 presidential and 1 vice presidential debate. All 4 debates were to have slightly different formats. The first one would be what President Bush wanted, a press conference-style debate with reporters and strict time limits. The second would be Governor Clinton's favorite, town hall style with no lecterns and a live audience comprised of undecided voters. The final presidential debate would consist of a single moderator for the first half and a panel of reporters for the last. The vice presidential debate would be an open forum with moderator Sandy Van Oker posing questions, and the candidates having unlimited time to answer them and intermingle with each other. President Bush knew these debates had the potential to turn things around. He needed a knockout punch, and this would be one of his last opportunities to throw one. But it didn't happen. Bush was easily overshadowed in the first debate by Ross Perot, who charmed the public with his frank talk and quick wit. Bill Clinton also held his own, chastising Bush for questioning his patriotism, and the president, at the end of the debate, would be declared the loser.
Are there important issues of character separating you from these other 2 men?
I think the American people should be the judge of that. I think character is a very important question. I said something the other day where I was accused of being like Joe McCarthy, because I questioned, I put it this way, I think it's wrong to demonstrate against your own country or organize demonstrations against your own country in foreign soil. I just think it's wrong. That maybe they say, well, it's a youthful indiscretion. I was 19 or 20 flying off an aircraft carrier, and that shaped me to be Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. And I'm sorry, but demonstrating, it's not a question of patriotism, it's a question of character and judgment. They get on me, Bill's gotten on me about read my lips, and when I make a mistake, I'll admit it. But he has not admitted a mistake, and I just find it impossible to understand how an American can demonstrate against his own country in a foreign land, organizing demonstrations against it, when young men are held prisoner in Hanoi or kids out of the ghetto were drafted. Some say, well, you're a little old-fashioned. Maybe I am, but I just don't think that's right. Now, whether it's character or judgment, whatever it is, I have a big difference here on this issue. And so we'll just have to see how it plays out. But I couldn't do that. And I don't think most Americans could do that. And they all say, well, it was a long time ago. Well, let's admit it then. Say, I made a terrible mistake. How could you be Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and have some kid say, when you have to make a tough decision, as I did in Panama or in Kuwait, and then have some kid jump up and say, well, I'm not going to go. The Commander-in-Chief was organizing demonstrations halfway around the world during another era. So there are differences. But that's about the main area where I think we have a difference. I don't know about, we'll talk about that a little with Ross here in a bit.
Mr. Perot, you have 1 minute.
I think American people will make their own decisions on character. And at a time when we have work to do and we need action, I think they need to clearly understand the backgrounds of each person. I think the press can play a huge role in making sure that the backgrounds are clearly presented in an objective way. Then make a decision. Certainly anyone in the White House should have the character to be there. But I think it's very important to measure when and where things occurred. Did they occur when you were a young person in your formative years, or did they occur while you were a senior official in the federal government? When you're a senior official in the federal government spending billions of dollars of taxpayers' money, and you're a mature individual, and you make a mistake, then that was on our ticket. If you make it as a young man, time passes. So I would say just, look at all 3 of us, decide who you think will do the job, pick that person in November, because believe me, as I've said before, the party's over, and it's time for the cleanup crew. And we do have to have change, and people who never take responsibility for anything when it happens on their watch and people who are in charge.
Your time is up.
Time is up.
Time is up.
More later.
More. Governor Clinton, you have 1 minute.
Ross gave a good answer, but I've got to respond directly to Mr. Bush. You have questioned my patriotism. You even brought some right-wing congressmen into the White House to plot how to attack me for going to Russia in 1969, 1970, when over 50,000 other Americans did. Now, I honor your service in World War II. I honor Mr. Perot's service in uniform and the service of every man and woman who ever served, including Admiral Crowell, who was your chairman of the Joint Chiefs and who's supporting me. But when Joe McCarthy went around this country attacking people's patriotism, he was wrong. He was wrong. And a senator from Connecticut stood up to him named Prescott Bush. Your father was right to stand up to Joe McCarthy. You were wrong to attack my patriotism. I was opposed to the war, but I love my country. And we need a president who will bring this country together, not divide it. We've had enough division. I want to lead a unified country.
The next debate was between the vice presidential candidates. Senator Al Gore and Vice President Dan Quayle dominated the event, with Perot's running mate, Admiral James Stockdale, looking confused and somewhat out of place.
You know, our country is in trouble. We simply cannot continue with this philosophy of giving huge tax cuts to the very wealthy, raising taxes on middle-income families the way Bush and Quayle have done, and then waiting for it to work. How much longer will it take, Dan, for trickle-down economics to work in your theory?
Well, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about trickle-down government, which you're for.
Well, I'd like to hear the answer.
But the question is, which you have failed to address, and that is, why is Bill Clinton qualified to be president of the United States? You've talked about Jim Baker. You've talked about trickle-down economics. You've talked about the worst economy in 50 years. You haven't told us one reason why Bill Clinton is qualified to be president of the United States.
I'll be happy to.
I want to go back and make a point.
Well, you've asked me a question. If you want to answer my question, I will answer yours.
I've made a statement. I have not asked a question. I've made a statement that you have not told us why Bill Clinton is qualified to be president of the United States. I pointed out what he said about the Persian Gulf War. But let me repeat it for you. Here's what he said, Senator. You know full well what he said.
You want me to answer your question?
I'm making a statement, then you can answer it.
All right. Can we give Admiral Stockdale a chance to come in here, please? And again, audience.
Here's what he said. If the vote, I mean, this is the Persian Gulf War, the most important event in his political lifetime. And here's what Bill Clinton says. If it was a close vote, I'd vote with the majority.
Right. Let's give Admiral Stockdale a chance to come in.
That qualifies you for being president of the United States. I hope America is listening very closely to this debate tonight.
And I think America is seeing right now the reason this nation is in gridlock.
Dan Quayle's enthusiastic performance in that debate excited many Republicans who felt that the ticket wasn't energetic enough. Many hoped that President Bush would follow Quayle's lead and challenge Bill Clinton's character directly. But the questioners in the audience in that following debate quickly made it clear to the candidates that there were more important issues that were on their mind.
We have a question right here.
Yes, how has the national debt personally affected each of your lives? And if it hasn't, how can you honestly find a cure for the economic problems of the common people if you have no experience in what's ailing them?
May I answer?
Well, Mr.
Who do you want to start with?
Of course.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. For each of you.
Yes.
So
it caused me to disrupt my private life and my business to get involved in this activity. That's how much I care about it. And believe me, if you knew my family and if you knew the private life I have, you would agree in a minute that that's a whole lot more fun than getting involved in politics. But I have lived the American dream. I came from a very modest background. Nobody's been luckier than I've been. All the way across the spectrum, and the greatest riches of all are my wife and children. It's true of any family. But I want all the children, I want these young people up here to be able to start with nothing but an idea like I did and build a business. But they've got to have a strong basic economy. And if you're in debt, it's like having a ball and chain around you. I just figure, as lucky as I've been, I owe it to them. And I owe it to the future generations. And on a very personal basis, I owe it to my children and grandchildren.
Thank you, Mr. Perot. Mr. President.
Well, I think the national debt affects everybody. Obviously, it has a lot to do with interest rates. It has
She's saying you personally.
On a personal basis, how has it affected you?
Has it affected you personally?
Well, I'm sure it has. I love my grandchildren. I want to think that think that they're going to be able to afford an education. I think that that's an important part of being a parent. Maybe I won't get it wrong. Are you suggesting that if somebody has means, that the national debt doesn't affect them?
Oh, what I'm saying,
I'm not sure I get it. Help me with the question, and I'll try to answer it.
I've had friends that have been laid off from jobs.
Yeah.
I know people who cannot afford to pay the mortgage on their homes, their car payment. I have personal problems with the national debt. But how has it affected you? And if you have no experience in it, how can you help us if you don't know what we're feeling?
I think she means more the recession, the economic problems today the country faces, rather than the deficit.
You ought to be in the White House for a day and hear what I hear and see what I see and read the mail I read and touch the people that I touch from time to time. I was in the Lomax AME Church. It's a black church just outside of Washington, D.C. And I read in the bulletin about teenage pregnancies, about the difficulty that families are having to make ends meet. I talked to parents. I mean, you got to care. Everybody cares if people aren't doing well. But I don't think it's fair to say you haven't had cancer, therefore you don't know what it's like. I don't think it's fair to say, whatever it is, that if you haven't been hit by it personally, but everybody's affected by the debt because of the tremendous interest that goes into paying on that debt. Everything's more expensive. Everything comes out of your pocket and my pocket. So it's that. But I think in terms of the recession, of course you feel it when you're president of the United States. And that's why I'm trying to do something about it by stimulating the export, investing more, better education systems. Thank you. I'm glad to clarify.
Tell me how it's affected you again. You know people who lost their jobs and lost their homes? Well, I've been governor of a small state for 12 years. I'll tell you how it's affected me. Every year, Congress and the President sign laws that make us do more things and gives us less money to do it with. I see people in my state, middle-class people, their taxes have gone up in Washington and their services have gone down, while the wealthy have gotten tax cuts. I have seen what's happened in this last 4 years when, in my state, when people lose their jobs, there's a good chance I'll know them by their names. When a factory closes, I know the people who ran it. When the businesses go bankrupt, I know them. And I've been out here for 13 months, meeting in meetings just like this, ever since October, with people like you all over America. People that have lost their jobs, lost their livelihood, lost their health insurance. What I want you to understand is the national debt is not the only cause of that. It is because America has not invested in its people. It is because we have not grown. It is because we've had 12 years of trickle-down economics. We've gone from 1st to 12th in the world in wages. We've had 4 years where we produced no private sector jobs. Most people are working harder for less money than they were making 10 years ago. It is because we are in the grip of a failed economic theory. And this decision you're about to make better be about what kind of economic theory you want. Not just people saying, I'm going to go fix it, but what are we going to do? What I think we have to do is invest in American jobs, American education, control American health care costs, and bring the American people together again.
At the conclusion of that debate, President Bush, who knew that he didn't have a very good performance, turned around and whispered to one of his staffers, "Who got me into this thing?" Bill Clinton's poll numbers stayed high, and Ross Perot's support stabilized at around 20%. The final debate brought forward a feistier George Bush. His message was simple: Bill Clinton is a tax and spend liberal. This was the president's best debate by far, but still no bounce.
Do you agree with the governor when he says that the middle class, the taxes on the middle class, do your numbers agree that the taxes on the middle class have gone up during the last?
Everybody's paying too much taxes. He refers to one tax increase. Let me remind you, it was a Democratic tax increase, and I didn't want to do it, and I went along with it. And I said, I make a mistake. If I make a mistake, I admit it. That's quite different than some. But I think that's the American way. I think everyone's paying too much. But I think this idea that you can go out and then he hits me for vetoing a tax bill. Yes, I did. And the American taxpayer ought to be glad they have a president to stand up to a spending Congress. We remember what it was like when we had a spending president and a spending Congress and interest rates. Who remembers that? They were at 21.5%. Under Jimmy Carter. and inflation was 15. We don't want to go back to that. And so, yes, everybody's taxed too much, and I want to get the taxes down, but not by signing a tax bill that's going to raise taxes on people.
Mr. President, when you said just then that you admit your mistakes, and you looked at Governor Clinton and said, what mistake is it that you want him to admit to?
Well, the record in Arkansas. I mean, look at it. And that's what we're asking America to have? Now look, he says Arkansas is a poor state. They are. But in almost every category, they're lagging. I'll give you an example. He talks about all the jobs he's created in 1 or 2 years. Over the last 10 years since he's been governor, there's 30% behind. 30%, they're 30% of the national average. On pay for teachers, on all these categories, Arkansas is right near the very bottom. You haven't heard me mention this before, but we're getting close now, and I think it's about time I start putting things in perspective. And I'm going to do that. It's not dirty campaigning, because he's been talking about my record for half a year here, 11 months here. And so we've got to do that. I got to get it in perspective. What's his mistake? Admit it, that Arkansas is doing very, very badly against any standard. Environment, support for police officers, whatever it is.
Governor, is that true?
Mr. Bush's Bureau of Labor Statistics says that Arkansas ranks first in the country in the growth of new jobs this year. First.
This year.
Fourth in manufacturing jobs. Fourth in the reduction of poverty. Fourth in income increase. Over the last 10 years, we've created manufacturing jobs much more rapidly than the national average. Over the last 5 years, our income has grown more rapidly than the national average. We are second in tax burden, the second lowest tax burden in the country. We have the lowest per capita state and local spending in the country. We're low spending, low tax burden. We dramatically increased investment, and our jobs are growing. I wish America had that kind of record, and I think most people looking at us tonight would like it if we had more jobs and a lower spending burden on the government.
Mr. Perot, if you were sitting at home now and just heard this exchange about Arkansas, who would you believe?
I grew up 5 blocks from Arkansas. Let's put it in perspective. It's a beautiful state. It's a fairly rural state. It has a population less than Chicago or Los Angeles, or about the size of Dallas and Fort Worth combined. So I think probably we're making a mistake night after night after night to cast the nation's future on a unit that small.
Why is that a mistake?
It's irrelevant.
What his...
You know, now,
what he did as governor of Arkansas is irrelevant?
No, but you can't, I could say, you know, that I ran a small grocery store on the corner, therefore I extrapolate that into the fact that I could run Walmart. That's not true.
With the fall campaign in full swing, all 3 major candidates blitz the airwaves with their political ads.
Today, for the first time in half a century, America is not at war. And America's wartime economy is changing to a peacetime economy. But that change has brought fear and uncertainty. The fear of losing a job, of losing a home. The uncertainty of tougher economic competition from around the world. But with change comes opportunity. And my agenda for American renewal can be the bridge to the future. It provides a choice of quality schools so our children have the knowledge to compete. It provides job training so workers have the new skills to compete. It provides health care for all and controls spiraling costs so our people can afford to compete. And my agenda strengthens small businesses that create 2 of every 3 jobs so we have the new jobs to compete. Today, we stand at the threshold of a new era. We change the world around us. Together, we must do the same at home.
I was born in a little town called Hope, Arkansas, 3 months after my father died. I remember that old 2-story house where I lived with my grandparents. They had very limited incomes. It was in 1963 that I went to Washington and met President Kennedy at the Boys Nation program. And I remember just thinking what an incredible country this was, that somebody like me, you know, had no money or anything, would be given the opportunity to meet the president. That's when I decided that I could really do public service because I cared so much about people. I worked my way through law school with part-time jobs, anything I could find. And after I graduated, I really didn't care about making a lot of money. I just wanted to go home and see if I could make a difference. We've worked hard in education and health care to create jobs, and we've made real progress.
Now it's exhilarating to me to think that as president, I could help to change all our people's lives for the better and bring hope back to the American dream.
Our children dream of the world that we promised them as parents, a world of unlimited opportunity. What would they say to us if they knew that by the year 2000, we will have left them with a national debt of $8 trillion? What would they say to us if they knew that we are making them the first generation of Americans with a standard of living below the generation before them? We cannot do this to our children. In this election, we have the opportunity to choose a candidate who is not a career politician, but a proven business leader with the ability to take on the tasks at hand, to balance the budget, to expand the tax base, to give our children back their American dream. The candidate is Ross Perot. The issue is our children. The choice is yours.
He said he was never drafted. Then he admitted he was drafted. Then he said he forgot being drafted. He said he was never deferred from the draft. Then he said he was. He said he never received special treatment, but he did receive special treatment. The question then was avoiding the draft. Now, for Bill Clinton, it's a question of avoiding the truth.
1988.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Then George Bush signed the second biggest tax increase in American history.
Read my lips.
George Bush increased taxes on the middle class. Bush doubled the beer tax and increased the gas tax by 56%. Now George Bush wants to give a $108,000 tax break to millionaires. $108,000. Guess who's going to pay? We can't afford 4 more years.
In his 12 years as governor, Bill Clinton has doubled his state's debt, doubled government spending, and signed the largest tax increase in his state's history. Yet his state remains the 45th worst in which to work, the 45th worst for children. It has the worst environmental policy, and the FBI says Arkansas had America's biggest increase in the rate of serious crime. And now Bill Clinton wants to do for America what he's done for Arkansas. America can't take that risk.
Remember?
And if you elect me president, you will be better off 4 years from now than you are today.
Average family income down $1,600 in 2 years.
You will be better off 4 years from now than you are today.
Family health care costs up $1,800 in 4 years.
You will be better off 4 years.
The second biggest tax increase in history.
If you elect me president, you will be better off 4 years from now than you are today.
Well, it's 4 years later. How you doing?
While the Cold War is ending, another war is now upon us. In this new war, the enemy is not the red flag of communism, but the red ink of our national debt, the red tape of our government bureaucracy. The casualties of this war are counted in lost jobs and lost dreams. As in all wars, the critical issue to winning is leadership. In this election, you can vote for a candidate who has proven his leadership by making the free enterprise system work, creating jobs, building businesses. A candidate who is not a business-as-usual politician, but a business leader with the know-how to expand the tax base, reduce the national debt, and restore the meaning of made in the USA. The issue is leadership. The candidate is Ross Perot. The choice is yours.
The night before the election, both Ross Perot and Bill Clinton decided to air traditional half-hour broadcasts on the 3 major networks. Perot would spend his time attacking both of his opponents. Clinton, on the other hand, knowing he was way ahead, decided to take the high road. Incidentally, the Bush campaign did not air such an ad. They had simply run out of money. The final polls on Election Day predicted Clinton would be the winner. He was strong in the Electoral College and ahead in traditionally Republican states. The final returns would be very good for the Democrats, and President Bush, gracious in defeat, would whisper to his wife Barbara after his concession speech, "It's all over."
Headline of the hour, Clinton jumps to a big lead. Clinton now with 150 Electoral College votes
George Bush with 12, 270 needed to win. It's the top of a new hour, just past 8 o'clock in the East, an hour of power for Bill Clinton. It could be the hour of decision. 17 states plus the District of Columbia have just had their polls closed. So far, it's a big wave for Bill Clinton. Let's look them over. Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, solidly Republican in the 80s, a bad economy, helped Clinton this time. Bill Clinton wins the Keystone State, Pennsylvania. This does not mean the death knell for the Bush quail chances, but to say the least, it's not a help. Illinois, land of Lincoln, 22 electoral votes. As expected, this one, they fall into place for Bill Clinton and Al Gore. Traditional Midwestern battleground goes to Clinton. Wham, Michigan, and this one will hurt the Republicans plenty. George Bush campaigned in Michigan as much as anywhere, but he loses it. Bill Clinton wins Michigan's 18 electoral votes. Ditto in New Jersey. Here's a state where Perot was a wild card in what is normally a strongly Republican presidential state. Not this time. Bill Clinton, 15 electoral votes in New Jersey. Wham, wham, wham. Pennsylvania, Illinois, New Jersey, all falling in line for Clinton. Massachusetts, one of the least surprising results of the night, 12 electoral votes goes to the Democrat, as is usually the case in presidential elections. But Missouri, southern border state where the Republicans frequently do well, again, not this time. Bill Clinton sweeps to victory in Missouri. Remember, Missouri is a heavily suburban state. That may be a portent of other things to come tonight. Bill Clinton wins Missouri. Maryland, another southern border state, 10 electoral votes, despite the fact that Maryland's Democratic governor came out for President Bush. Clinton wins Maryland, as pretty much was expected. Connecticut, one of George Bush's home states, the richest state in the nation, normally votes Republican, but Connecticut's had a bad economy. Clinton gets Connecticut's 8 electoral votes. Maine, another upper northeast state, Maine's 4 electoral votes, drop behind Bill Clinton. District of Columbia, the least surprising verdict of the evening, 3 electoral votes go to Bill Clinton.
Campaign 92, election night.
Or so. Here are the states that are simply too close to call for us. I did mention Texas. The idea that Arizona is too close to call boggles the mind. That has been solid Republican territory. It is the home base, of course, of Barry Goldwater, who was quite critical, incidentally, of George Bush, especially for his stand on abortion. Down south, Mississippi and Alabama are still in play. That was not expected. Ohio still in play. Virginia and North Carolina still in play. So there are some states that could come in for George Bush, but not enough to provide a firebreak to hold off at this hour, Tim Russert, what seems to be the inevitable Bill Clinton victory. And in Washington, I guess, for the last week or so, they've already been preparing for this eventuality.
Well, Tom, it's interesting. I just got off the phone talking to folks in Washington about the inevitability of this. 5 Republican bureaucrats were having a dinner talking about where they had placed their resumes, bemoaning the fact that they are now out of the government job. And one concluded the dinner by saying, and you know, the worst thing about it is the economy's so bad. Well, finally, on November 3rd, there's a wake-up call.
The American people have spoken. They have chosen Governor Clinton. Congratulations. Wait a minute. No. Whoop. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. The only way we're going to make it work if all team up together. So let's give Governor Clinton a big round of applause. He's won.
We'll have a new president of the United States. CBS News has never been wrong in making one of these calls in a presidential race. Underscore the word never. Our CBS News estimate is that with Ohio, these are live pictures from Little Rock, Arkansas, where the word will spread faster than gossip in a small town, that Ohio has dropped for Clinton. Bill Clinton will be the new president of the United States. Al Gore will be the new vice president of the United States. We estimate, look at the map now, everything in blue belongs to Bill Clinton. 286 electoral college votes at a rot-gut minimum. George Bush has 64 electoral votes so far. Still a long way to go. Florida and Texas among the many states still out, and there's 10 or 12 minutes before the polls close in Washington, Oregon, and California, among others.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. 1 minute, please. Thank you very, very much. You know, it's real it's real hell to lose these squeakers, isn't it? I want to tell you that for the past 35 years, I've been fortunate to call George Bush my friend, and I have had the great pleasure of introducing him in almost all of the many different capacities in which he has so ably served this great country of ours. And for nearly 4 years now, I have had the privilege of introducing him as the President of the United States.
Thank you very much. Hey, listen, you guys. Hey. Thank you very much. Look. Thank you so much. Well, here's the way I see it. Here's the way we see it, and the country should see it, that the people have spoken, and we respect the majesty of the democratic system. I just called Governor Clinton over in Little Rock and offered my congratulations. He did run a strong campaign. I wish him well in the White House, and I want the country to know that our entire administration will work closely with his team to ensure the smooth transition of power. There is important work to be done, and America must always come first. So we will get behind this new president and wish him well.
Yale Law School. He persuaded her to come to Arkansas and join him there. They both taught at the University of Arkansas Law School, and then he began his political career running first unsuccessfully for Congress, then successfully for Attorney General, then elected governor at the age of 34, defeated, and then returning to be elected altogether 5 terms. Home state, he stands before them, the President-elect of the United States, the 42nd.
My fellow Americans, on this day, with high hopes and brave hearts in massive numbers, the American people have voted to make a new beginning. Not very long ago, I received a telephone call from President Bush. It was a generous and forthcoming telephone call of real congratulations and an offer to work with me in keeping our democracy running in an effective and important transition. I want all of you to join with me tonight in expressing our gratitude to President Bush for his lifetime of public service, for the effort he made from the time he was a young soldier in World War II, to helping to bring about an end to the Cold War, to our victory in the Gulf War, to the grace with which he conceded the results of this election tonight in the finest American tradition. Let's give Mr. Bush and his family a hand. And now, I would like to ask Senator Gore to come up here and say a few words as we begin our new partnership for a new country. Please welcome him to the platform. Thank you, President-elect Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton spoke sensibly and honestly to the American people. As the attacks against him became more and more desperate, he remained calm. He believed in the American people and kept faith that hope would indeed triumph over fear. Bill Clinton won because he was willing to lose. He refused to mislead voters. He stuck to his beliefs. He asked for your vote by challenging you to make America better. Where I come from, we have a name for that. It's called character.
Americans were relieved another long, brutal election was finally behind us. However, the sweet smell of democracy was in the air. Without a single gunshot or riot, the American people had decided to change course. The torch had been passed to a new leader, one who offered hope and inspiration. The birth of a new presidency in America is a kind of rebirth, a moment of promise and renewal. Politics, by its very nature, is a business of disagreement. But on election night, we all stand together, momentarily putting our disagreements aside. After all, when you finally get right down to it, we're all part of this great human experiment that we call America. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jim Heath.
I may not have all the answers, and I won't always tell you what you want to hear, but I will wake up every day thinking about you and your interests and your hopes and your children and your future, and that's what you need in the White House.